Hello everyone, I am Vanish Signal. And before we start with some news stories, like and subscribe to the channel, also comment down below from where you are watching this. The third floor apartment. When I moved into my new building, the landlord mentioned casually that the unit above mine, apartment 3C, had been empty for years. Renovation delays, he said. Still, every night around 2:17 a.m., I heard footsteps pacing above me. Not just the floor creaking, actual, deliberate footsteps, heels, then the soft dragging of something heavy, like cloth or rope. I brought it up to him a week later, and he looked at me like I'd said something offensive. "Nobody has a key to 3C, he said. "It's sealed. We don't rent that floor." Curious, I waited until afternoon, when everything felt less eerie, and went up to the third floor. The hallway was dusty, like no one had walked through in months, but the door to 3C, slightly ajar. I pushed it open and saw a neat, untouched apartment. Furniture still covered in plastic, windows shut tight. Except for the footprints in the dust, walking from the bathroom to the window, over and over again. That night, the footsteps started again. But this time, they stopped directly above my bed. Then came a single thump, like someone had jumped in place. The ceiling light flickered. I lay frozen, listening, as something scraped across the floor above. The next day, I noticed a crack forming in the ceiling, directly above my bed. The red balloon. My daughter came home from school one day with a red balloon. No party, no explanation. Just walked off the bus holding it tight like it was hers. I asked where she got it, and she said, "The man at the woods gave it to me." We lived 2 miles from any woods. She'd have to cross 2 highways and a creek. That night, she tied the balloon to her bedpost and said, "He'll come visit tonight." I figured she was making things up, until I heard something tapping at her window around 3 a.m. Not knocking, tapping, rhythmic. 3 short taps, pause, then again. I checked outside. Nothing. The yard was still. Her window looked out over the backyard fence. No one could stand there without making noise. The next morning, the balloon was gone, and in its place was a small, hand-drawn picture on the pillow. A tall, faceless figure holding my daughter's hand. Above them, another red balloon. She swore she didn't draw it. I burned it. I made her sleep in my room. But some nights, I still hear that same tapping. And in the morning, there's another picture waiting. Different each time. One showed them standing in front of our house. One was just our family, minus me. Last night's picture showed me asleep, the man at the window. The midnight caller. When I worked the late shift at the small-town dispatch center, we had a direct line on the desk. A landline, old and heavy, meant only for internal use. It never rang. In fact, it wasn't connected to the outside network at all. But every Wednesday at exactly 12:03 a.m., it would buzz once. Just once. Not a full ring. A buzz, like someone gently pressing the receiver. We joked about it, called it the weekly ghost, but nobody answered it. Until one night I picked it up, half daring myself. There was silence, then static. Then a voice I'll never forget. "She's still under the floor," it said. Flat, motionless. I froze. "Who is this?" More static. "Still under the floor," it repeated. "The basement. You forgot the basement." That building never had a basement, or so we thought. 2 months later, when the dispatch center was being renovated, they broke into the foundation and found an old crawl space that wasn't on the plans. There were bones down there, old, cracked, wrapped in cloth. The phone never buzzed again. The man in the attic. It started with noises, creaks in the ceiling, soft footsteps overhead, even though our attic was sealed shut. No access point. Just a nailed-down hatch in the hallway. My wife thought it was raccoons. I thought maybe old wood settling. Until the night we heard whispering. It was about 2 a.m. I was in bed, half asleep, when I heard a voice directly above me. Not loud, but close, like someone whispering through floorboards. "Don't move," it said. "He listens when you move." I jumped out of bed, heart racing. My wife heard it too. We grabbed flashlights, pulled down the hatch, and forced the attic open. There was dust, cobwebs, and in the far corner, something worse. A pile of Polaroids. Dozens of them. All of me and my wife, asleep in bed. Taken from above. We called the police. They searched everything. Found no one. But every week since, I find a new photo. Always fresh. Always from the attic. We don't sleep much anymore. The cradle that rocked itself, my cousin inherited an old farmhouse in Vermont. The kind you see in oil paintings. Peeling white paint, sagging porch, chimney chipped by time. He moved in alone, said he needed space after the divorce, a fresh start. I helped him move boxes the first weekend and stayed the night in a small guest room upstairs. That's when I noticed the cradle. It was tucked into a corner under the eaves. Antique, finely carved, too ornate to just be a leftover. It creaked gently, like it had been pushed moments before I entered the room. I laughed, assuming he set it up for creepy vibes. He didn't laugh back. Said it was already there when he moved in, and every time he tried to move it, he'd find it back in the same spot the next morning. That night, I couldn't sleep. Around 3:12 a.m., I heard the cradle rock. Slow, squeak, pause, squeak, like someone gently soothing something inside. I got up, turned on the light. Empty. But the cradle was still moving, faintly. I stopped it with my hand, but the second I let go, it began again. I didn't sleep. Neither did he. The next day, he boxed it up and locked it in the shed out back. We checked it together before leaving. Still locked, still sealed. The next morning, it was back in the room. That was the last time I visited. The woman in the window. In 2010, I worked as a night janitor at an old hospital slated for demolition. The place had shut down years earlier. Black mold, lawsuits, a couple of suspicious deaths they never cleared up. Only a few wings were still used for storage, and my job was to sweep, check for squatters, and report anything weird. One night, I passed through the pediatric wing, a place I always avoided. The walls were still painted with faded cartoons, balloons, animals, smiling clouds. It made the silence worse. I did a quick sweep and turned to go when I saw it. A woman standing at the end of the hallway, facing the window. I called out, thinking maybe someone snuck in. She didn't move, just stood there, in a thin gown, long hair hanging like curtains down her back. Her hands were pressed to the glass. I walked toward her slowly, calling again. She didn't turn around. When I got within 10 feet, I felt cold, like I'd stepped into a walk-in freezer. My breath fogged. The air smelled like wet earth and iron. I reached out, and she vanished. Not slowly, just gone, like someone snuffed a flame. But the handprints were still there, small, greasy outlines smeared on the glass. I left early that night. Told my supervisor it was a trespasser. He didn't question it, just nodded and said, "You saw her too, huh?" The man in the photos, when I was 11, my older cousin passed away unexpectedly. My aunt gave me a photo album of our childhood together, something to remember him by. It was full of birthday parties, camping trips, school concerts. The kind of moments you forget until you see them frozen in time. I kept it in my room, flipping through it on nights I missed him. About a year later, I noticed something strange in one of the photos. It was from a 4th of July cookout, and in the background, half hidden behind the grill, was a tall man in a wide-brimmed hat. He didn't look like family. His face was blurred. I figured it was a neighbor or stranger who'd wandered into frame. But he was in more photos. At first, just 1 or 2. Then I started seeing him in almost every picture, always in the background, always in shadow, never fully visible. He'd be standing by the edge of the woods, or reflected faintly in a window, or just around a corner. My cousin never mentioned him, neither did anyone else. I showed the album to my mom. She flipped through, growing more tense with each page. Finally, she closed the book and told me to throw it out. I didn't. I put it in the attic. Years later, while helping clean out the house, I found it again. Only now, he wasn't in the background anymore. In the last photo, the one I know used to be just me and my cousin, he was standing between us. And this time, he was smiling. The garage door. We moved into a small 2-story house on a quiet street after my husband's job relocated us. Nothing fancy, just a rental while we figured out where to settle. It had a detached garage with one of those old manual doors, the kind you have to lift by hand. We didn't use it much. We didn't have a second car. One morning, I noticed it was open. I asked my husband if he'd used it, and he said no. We closed it and didn't think much of it. But it happened again, and again. Sometimes overnight, sometimes while we were both at work. We asked the landlord to change the lock. He did. It kept happening. Then the noises started. Low, dragging sounds from the backyard. I'd hear them from the kitchen, late at night, like something heavy being pulled across the pavement. I made my husband check. He found nothing. No marks, no prints. Then one night, I stayed up to watch. Around 2:12 a.m., the garage door creaked open, slow and deliberate. My breath caught. I watched, heart hammering, but nothing came out. The yard stayed still. Quiet. The next morning, I found something scratched into the wooden frame of the garage door. A single word, carved deep into the wood. Soon. We moved out the following week. The landlord didn't even ask why. The radio in the attic. After my grandfather passed away, we inherited his old farmhouse in rural Idaho. It was the kind of place that looked haunted even in daylight. Peeling paint, crooked shutters, a wind vane that hadn't moved in years. The attic had always been off limits when we were kids. He kept a padlock on it, told us it was filled with old insulation and asbestos. But now that the place was ours, curiosity got the better of me. I pried the door open on my 3rd night there. The attic was cramped and stale, the air thick with decades of dust. I found trunks of his clothes, stacks of yellowed newspapers, and a single wooden chair beneath a dusty skylight. But what caught my eye was the radio. Big, boxy, and hidden under a moth-eaten sheet like someone had tried to forget about it. It had a cracked dial and warped speaker cloth. But when I plugged it in, it hummed to life instantly. No static, just a soft, droning tone. And then a voice. It wasn't speaking English. It sounded like whispers played in reverse, layered on top of each other, garbled and unsettling. But I recognized one thing. It said my name. Not just once, but several times. Calmly, like it was waiting for me to answer. I yanked the cord from the wall and left the radio in the attic. That night, it turned on by itself. The sound filled the house, and the voice was louder, more urgent, still garbled but clearer than before. And as it spoke, I heard something else. Slow, deliberate footsteps above me, pacing back and forth in the attic. Every night after that, The radio came on at exactly 3:11 a.m. The voice got stronger, the words more pronounced. Eventually, on the fifth night, it spoke in perfect English. Just one sentence. Let me down. The next morning, I found the attic door wide open. The lock was twisted, nearly torn from the wood. But the radio? It was gone. There were footprints in the dust, leading not to the door, but to the vent. The man in the crawl space. When I rented a small house just outside Portland, the landlord gave me a brief tour. Everything looked fine, except for a metal grate in the living room floor. Leads to the crawl space, he said. Sometimes it creaks at night. Just raccoons. Nothing to worry about. For the first few weeks, I believed him. The place was quiet, cozy even. But then the creaking changed. It wasn't random scuttling anymore. It was rhythmic, intentional. It started matching my steps. If I walked from the kitchen to the hallway, I'd hear something tracking just below me. Pause when I paused. Continue when I did. One night, I dropped my phone while brushing my teeth. It slid across the floor and lit up as it landed next to the crawlspace vent. I bent down to grab it and saw eyes looking back at me. Human eyes, unblinking, wide open, watching. I froze, then screamed. I called the police. They showed up within minutes, and a full search of the crawlspace turned up something worse than I expected. A makeshift bed of blankets, food wrappers, an empty water jug, and a stack of Polaroids. They were all of me. Some through the bathroom window, some under my bed. Some taken from low angles, as if the camera had been inches from the floorboards. But the most recent one chilled me to the core. It was taken from inside the house, not from below. It showed me brushing my teeth, and in the mirror behind me, there he was, grinning. They never found him. But I found one more photo days later, slipped under my pillow. It was blank, except for a message scribbled on the back. Thanks for letting me stay. The whisper from apartment B. When I first moved into my apartment complex, apartment B across the hall was listed as vacant. The door was always shut, the lights always off, and the mailbox was never touched. Still, every so often, I'd hear muffled talking through the walls late at night. Not loud, not angry, just the low murmur of someone whispering a story, like trying to calm a child. It wasn't threatening, exactly, but it felt off, like hearing someone read aloud in a dream. I assumed someone had moved in without notifying the building manager. Maybe someone squatting quietly, trying not to be noticed. But when I asked, the landlord assured me, no one's rented B in over 2 years, still being renovated. You'd know if someone moved in. That unit's sealed. One night, the whispers got louder. Not just talking now, chanting, repeating phrases, the same 2 lines, over and over. I put my ear to the wall and tried to make out the words. They weren't in English. It sounded almost like a chant, or maybe a prayer. I knocked on the wall. The whispering stopped immediately. Later that night, I got a call. Unknown number. I answered, and a voice, soft, trembling, whispered, "Don't knock again." Then the line went dead. I didn't sleep. Every creak sounded deliberate, like someone walking barefoot on the floorboards outside my door. A week later, I came home to find a note slid under my door. Just a sheet of yellowed paper with a message in blocky, shaky handwriting. They hear through the walls. No name, no other explanation. That night, I noticed something strange. A soft scratching, coming from behind my bathroom mirror, like someone tracing their nails in slow circles. I left that night and didn't go back. I moved out the next day. The landlord acted surprised. "You're not the first," he said. "They all leave after hearing the same voice." Apartment B is still listed as vacant, but I know someone, or something, lives there, and it doesn't like being noticed. The children under the stairs. Back in 2007, I worked construction on a site where we were tearing down an old orphanage to make way for a condo complex. The building had been abandoned since the late 60s. It was gutted inside, the wallpaper peeling, stairwells collapsing, and rusted cribs still bolted to some of the floors. The entire place reeked of mold, and the halls carried this odd, stale echo that made your voice sound smaller. On the second day of demolition, one of the crew found a hidden panel in the basement. Behind it, a set of narrow stairs leading down to a sub-basement that didn't appear on any of the original blueprints. We joked it was where they kept the bad kids, but something about it felt wrong. We were told not to enter, liability and all that. But curiosity got the better of me. I snuck down one night with a flashlight. The air was thick, still, and smelled like wet stone and mildew. The stairs led to a room no bigger than a large closet. Along the walls were child-sized mattresses, old, rotted through, and carvings etched into the concrete. Names, dozens of them, and handprints, tiny ones, some scratched in so deeply that flakes of old paint still clung to the edges. Then I heard it. Laughter, high-pitched, like children playing hide-and-seek. I spun around, lights shaking. No one there. But the laughter grew. Dozens of voices. Then a whisper, right in my ear. "We're still waiting." I got out fast. Nearly fell trying to climb back up. The next day, we poured concrete into the sub-basement and sealed it permanently. The foreman didn't argue. He'd seen it too. Came back pale as chalk, muttering about small shadows moving without sound. A year later, the condos were finished. But that unit, the one built directly over the stairs, no one's lived in it more than a month. They always complain about the same thing. Footsteps in the floor at night, just beneath the bed. And once, a tenant said their toddler kept pointing at the air vent and asking, "Can I play with the children who live under the floor?" They moved out the next day. That unit is always empty, always cold. And the floorboards creak like they're trying to whisper back. The Voice on Channel 6. I used to work the night shift as a paramedic in a rural part of Montana, where the radio channels were mostly quiet, except for the occasional call-out or cross-chatter from other departments. But there was one channel, Channel 6, that we were told to avoid. Not because it was restricted, but because people said it was cursed. The warning wasn't in any manual. It was something passed down from shift to shift. A kind of folklore we all laughed about until night came. The rule was simple. If your scanner flips to Channel 6, don't acknowledge it. Don't respond. Don't listen. Just switch back and pretend it didn't happen. I thought it was nonsense. Radio interference happens all the time. Weather, signal bounce, equipment issues. But then, one night, everything changed. It was mid-January, bitter cold. My partner and I had been sitting in the rig for almost 2 hours with zero activity. Even the base was quiet. The air was so still, even the heater felt like it hummed too loudly. That's when my radio flicked over on its own. No static, no warning. Just a clean click. Channel 6. The voice came through immediately. Gravelly, male, but more than one tone. Like two people trying to speak at once. Slightly out of sync. And it said, "Unit 31. I see you." That was my unit. My exact ID. I froze. My partner looked at me, confused. I reached for the volume knob, but before I could move, the voice came back. "Turn left." We weren't moving. We were parked at a turnout off Route 2. There was no left to turn, but my hand went cold. And then headlights appeared ahead. Dim, yellow, flickering like an older model. Another ambulance, identical to ours, parked sideways across the road, maybe 30 feet in front. I jumped out of the cab. Nothing. No sound. No other vehicle. When I looked again, the road was empty. There weren't even tire tracks in the frost. I didn't sleep for days after. Since then, every few weeks, like clockwork, my radio flips to channel 6 at exactly 3:17 a.m., no matter where I am, no matter which rig I'm in. And every time, the voice asks the same thing. Why didn't you turn? I still don't have an answer. The patient in bed 9. During my years as a night nurse at a mid-sized hospital in southern Illinois, we had one room nobody wanted to deal with, room 209. On the surface, it was just another recovery room, but it had a reputation among staff that went back over a decade. It wasn't the room itself. It was the bed. Bed 9. Patients placed in bed 9 didn't last long. Some would scream in their sleep. Others would refuse to close their eyes. A few discharged themselves within hours of admission. The reasons varied, but the stories were all the same. Something was watching them, always from the corner of the room. One elderly woman became so hysterical, she tore out her IV and had to be restrained. She cried for hours. When we tried to calm her down, she whispered, "She's here. She wants me next." That might sound like the ranting of a confused patient, but she had no history of mental illness. Her chart was clean. Her mind was sharp. She had been admitted for dehydration, nothing more. One night, we admitted a man, mid-30s, stable after a minor car crash. He was groggy but alert, and we had no open beds except bed 9. We hesitated, but protocol is protocol. Around 2:30 a.m., the alarm started. His monitor spiked, then flatlined. I rushed in and found him sitting upright, staring into the corner with wide, empty eyes. "She's here," he said. "She found me." Then he collapsed. We tried everything: defibrillator, CPR, oxygen. Nothing worked. His heart had simply stopped. No medical cause. When we stripped the bed to prepare it for cleaning, we noticed something strange. Dozens of small, perfectly round burn marks beneath the fitted sheet. Not hot, not charred, just dark, imprinted like iron coins pressed into fabric. We replaced the mattress, filed the reports, cleaned the room top to bottom. But it happened again. A woman admitted with a broken ankle. Perfect vitals. She begged to be moved after an hour. Claimed a woman was standing in the corner whispering her name. We laughed it off. Hours later, she was dead. Stroke. No warning. No cause. Just gone. Now, room 209 is used for storage. The bed remains. Still in plastic. No one will move it. We've asked. But sometimes, around 2:30 a.m., the call light buzzes from that room. When we check, no one's there. Just the faint hiss of the intercom and the sound of someone breathing, slow, shallow, almost like they're right behind you. I transferred floors the next month. I never went back. The man with no eyes. I used to volunteer for a fire department in northern Pennsylvania, small town, surrounded by endless forest, where everyone knew everyone, and nothing truly strange ever happened. That's what I thought, anyway. Until the night we got a distress call from a woman on Mill Creek Road. She said her husband had collapsed and wasn't breathing. It was routine. We jumped in the truck and raced to the address. When we got there, the house was quiet. Not abandoned, just paused. The lights were on, but dim. The woman who answered the door was shaking, her hands covered in something dark. Blood, I assumed. She led us to the living room. There was a man on the floor, face down, not breathing. I dropped beside him to check for a pulse, but the second I rolled him over, I stopped cold. He didn't have eyes, not gouged, not missing, just smooth skin where they should have been, as if he'd been born that way. I stared, heart hammering, and that's when he sat up. Fast, like a puppet pulled by a string. His head turned toward me, and he opened his mouth, but no sound came out, just a long, rattling exhale that felt like it scraped the back of my brain. My partner grabbed my shoulder and yanked me back. "We're leaving," he whispered. We practically dragged the woman out with us. When we got to the truck, she was crying and babbling about how he had come home that way, how he walked through the door like nothing was wrong, how he smiled with that eyeless face and said he was finally ready to see. We radioed it in. Dispatch confirmed there was no record of a call from her address, no phone logs, no signal. When police arrived, the house was empty. The man was gone. So was the body, the blood, everything. But in the center of the living room, carved into the hardwood, was a message. I only borrowed his eyes. Whispers in the grain elevator. I grew up near a massive grain elevator complex that had been abandoned since the early 80s. Towering concrete silos, rusted staircases, conveyor belts frozen mid-motion. Basically, a perfect place for kids to dare each other into stupid decisions. And when I was 17, I made one of those decisions. It was late fall, just before the first snow. A friend of mine, Devin, said he'd heard something while walking past the silos at night. A voice, low, whispering. He said it called his name. We all laughed it off, but deep down, we were hooked. So we made a plan. Grab flashlights, sneak in around midnight, and see for ourselves. There were 5 of us. We climbed through a break in the fence and made our way inside. The silence was the first thing that hit me. So deep and unnatural that every footstep echoed for miles. We split up like idiots. I took the northeast stairwell, slowly climbing past broken windows and graffiti-covered walls. About 3 floors up, I started hearing it. A voice. Not loud, not even fully formed words. Just suggestion. Hissing vowels and wet consonants that seemed to drip directly into my thoughts. I told myself it was the wind, but it wasn't. It followed me, matched my steps, grew louder when I paused. Then I reached the top platform. The floor was covered in moldy grain, probably years old. But there, right in the center, was a circle of cleared space, perfectly round. And inside it, a pile of teeth. Human teeth. Dozens of them, yellowed and cracked, and some still bloody. My legs went numb. Then the whispering stopped. It didn't fade, it just ceased, like a switch flipped off. And from behind me, I heard my name. Not whispered. Spoken, clearly, calmly. I turned around, flashlight trembling, and saw nothing. Just the dark hallway. But when I shone my light down the stairs, I saw movement. Something pale pulling itself backward around the corner. Not walking, dragging. As if it didn't need to move like us. I ran. We all did. Devin swore something followed him out. None of us ever went back. The next spring, the structure was torn down. They said it was dangerous, structurally unsound. But the demolition crew refused to clear out the stairwell first. The foreman quit after spending 10 minutes inside. Said he heard something breathing in the walls. We believed him, because every time I try to sleep, I still hear that voice. And sometimes, it says my name. The last bell at Baxter High. I used to teach history at a small-town high school in Pennsylvania. Baxter High, built sometime in the late 1940s. It was a crumbling brick maze of narrow hallways, ancient lockers, and those old-style intercom speakers that crackled whenever the principal tried to talk. Despite its charm, the building always felt wrong, not in an obvious way, more like it never fully woke up. Even when packed with hundreds of students, it felt empty, like something beneath it was holding its breath. There was one hallway, West Wing 3, that was always colder than the rest. The janitors said the insulation was bad. I believed that until one Thursday in late spring when I stayed late grading papers. The halls were deserted, custodians gone, lights flickering one by one. I was the only one left on the second floor. Around 7:20 p.m., I heard the bell ring. Just once. A single, echoing tone. Sharp, mechanical, exactly like the end-of-day bell. But the system was digital now, controlled by a software timer that automatically shut off after hours. I hadn't heard that sound in weeks. It had been broken, replaced by tones. I stood up, walked to the hallway, and saw a figure at the far end, standing beneath the broken fluorescent that never turned on. It was a student, I thought, back turned, still, motionless. Strange thing was, there shouldn't have been any students left in the building, not that late, not on a Thursday. "Hey," I called. "You okay?" The figure didn't move. I walked down the corridor, my footsteps hollow against the old tile. The air grew colder, heavier, like walking underwater. I was maybe 10 feet away when the figure turned, not gradually, but all at once, like a glitch. I saw no face, just a blank, skin-colored shape, like the idea of a face without features. It was wearing a faded Letterman jacket. Then the bell rang again. I blinked. The hallway was empty. I reported it to the office the next day. The principal smiled awkwardly and said, "That's why we don't schedule night classes in West Wing 3. No explanation, just a joke and a warning buried under that smile. That Monday, I transferred to another school. A few weeks later, I heard the intercom crackle to life during a storm drill. Through the static, a voice whispered, "Last bell." Room 317, Baxter High, doesn't have a room 317. It only has 2 floors. But that hallway, West Wing 3, sometimes stretches just a little longer than it should. And if you walk it alone, you might just find that door. The flooded road. I was working dispatch in a small town in Mississippi when the river flooded. It wasn't a major event, not biblical or headline-worthy, but bad enough to make certain roads dangerous. One in particular, Barrow Creek Road, was closed off with barricades and cones. Local traffic signs, clear and bright. Everyone in town knew to avoid it. At 3:41 a.m. on a fog-heavy Sunday, a call came in from a number registered to a local mechanic, Curtis Ray. He was a good guy, mid-50s, always wore coveralls and smelled like diesel. Known for driving an old Ford truck with a cassette player that only worked when it rained. The call lasted 19 seconds. "Dispatch," I answered. "She's standing in the water," Curtis said. His voice was calm but confused, like he wasn't sure what he was seeing. "Middle of the road, just standing there." I asked for a location. No answer. "Sir? Curtis?" Then a click. That was it. Officers were sent out immediately. They found his truck on Barrow Creek Road, headlights cutting through thick fog, the engine still running. The flood waters had risen just above tire level. The cassette player was playing static. No sign of Curtis. But in the shallow water, 50 feet ahead of the truck, there was a single boot. Next to it, a soaked paper photograph floating face up. A wedding photo. Curtis and a woman, young, happy, standing beside the creek. The twist. The woman had died over 20 years ago. Her name was Charlotte Ray, drowned in that very creek after her car skidded off the road during a thunderstorm. Curtis had never remarried. He never even dated again. For days after, we tried calling his phone. It went straight to voicemail. On the fourth day, a message appeared in our call logs. 3:41 a.m. Same timestamp as the first call. The audio? Just water. Endless rushing water. And then, faintly, Curtis's voice. She was waiting. We checked the creek again, and no truck, no boot. Not even the barricades remained. Just a flat stretch of road disappearing into the fog, and the sound of water lapping at something unseen beneath the surface. The siren in the field. It was a quiet, cloudless evening in late September when Officer Hall received the call. A 911 report from an aging farmer named Russell, who lived alone on the edge of a forgotten cornfield in Bishop, Kansas. The man's voice was shaking as he explained that he'd been hearing an air raid siren, loud, sustained, rising and falling, in the center of his field. There were no weather alerts, no vehicles, no power failures. The sound had started just after sundown, and it hadn't let up since. Curious but skeptical, Hall drove out. The property was isolated, a lonely gravel path leading up to a fading white farmhouse with a front porch that sagged with age. The nearest neighbor was over 2 miles away. Russell met him with a shotgun and the eyes of a man who'd seen something he didn't want to believe. "It's still going," he whispered. "Been going for hours. I didn't go in. I won't." Hall stepped out and listened. Sure enough, a siren whined in the distance. Low, sustained, and haunting. But it wasn't quite right. Too pure, too consistent. No oscillation from Doppler effect, no tinny distortion. Just an eerie, unwavering wail that drifted through the corn, like something breathing from underground. He followed it into the field, pushing through rows of dry, rustling stalks. 10 steps in, the wind died. 15, and his flashlight flickered. By 30, the siren was all he could hear. No insects, no crunch beneath his boots. Just the call. At the center, the sound abruptly stopped. And that's when he saw it. Squatting between rows, its limbs too long, back arched like it had never stood upright. Its skin was pale like paper, stretched taut over the suggestion of bones. But its face was featureless. No eyes, no mouth, nothing. And then the noise began again. Not from a speaker, not from a machine, but from within it. A tremor in its chest, followed by the same siren, emerging in perfect imitation. Louder than before. Hall stumbled backward. He didn't wait. He turned and ran, the corn whipping at his face and arms, the sound now behind him, chasing him with each unnatural exhale. He made it back to the cruiser. The farmer never left the porch. When Hall looked back, the field was still. They searched it the next day. Nothing. No speakers, no signs of machinery. But no birds would land there. The soil was untouched. Every year since, on the same night, someone reports hearing that siren from somewhere deep in that field. The farm has long been abandoned. But still, the sound comes, and no one who hears it stays past nightfall. The Yellow Room. In 2014, dispatch in Iowa City received a 911 call at 7:48 p.m. from a college student named Erica. Her voice was panicked but low, barely audible through layers of static. "I can't find the stairs," she repeated. "It's all yellow up here. It wasn't yellow before." The line dropped. Attempts to call back failed. Officers responded to the address provided, an off-campus rental house near the university. It was a weathered 3-story building that had seen decades of student renters. Erica shared it with 5 others. None had seen her since that morning. Her car was still gone, and no one remembered her coming back from class. Her phone, however, was pinging from inside the house. Officers and roommates searched the common areas, then bedrooms. Nothing. Then they reached the attic. The door was shut, padlocked from the outside, something none of the tenants had noticed before. They broke the lock. The attic was a box of a room. No windows, no light. The air was thick with paint fumes. Every surface, walls, floor, even the ceiling, was coated in bright, sticky yellow paint, still wet in places. In the corner was Erica's phone. Its screen was cracked, half buried in a pool of yellow. Across one wall, smeared in darker pigment, one word, "Stay." The landlord was called in. He claimed the attic had been sealed for years, had no insulation, no entry point, nothing. The home's blueprints didn't even show the room. It wasn't supposed to exist. There was no trace of Erica, no footprints in the paint, no signs she had entered or left. Weeks passed. Then one of the roommates, Camille, started waking up at 3:17 a.m. every night, always from a dream about a yellow hallway. Each time she swore she'd been walking in circles, each time she heard someone following. Then the paint stains began, first on the ceiling, then the bathroom tile, then her sheets. She moved out. No new tenant has lasted more than a few months since. All report similar dreams. All complain of a smell, sweet, like turpentine. Every once in a while, someone finds a new smudge of yellow, smeared across the walls as though a finger had drawn it. No one has been able to reach Erica. Her social media went dark. Her family filed a missing persons report, but with no evidence of foul play, the case stalled. The attic was resealed, then broken open again by another tenant, then sealed once more. A cycle. But always, the same phrase remains, written somewhere in the yellow. Stay. The man who called his own death. In January of 2022, a 911 operator working in a quiet, wooded corner of rural Oregon received a call that would haunt her for years. The number was listed as unregistered, and there was no caller ID. But the voice that came through was startlingly clear. A man in his mid-30s speaking with unsettling calm. "There's going to be a death in 30 minutes, he said. The operator, a seasoned dispatcher named Kendra, blinked in surprise and sat upright. She asked for clarification. "Mine," the man replied, his voice level and emotionless. "It's already started." He refused to give his name, wouldn't say exactly where he was. Instead, he began to describe his surroundings in vivid detail. A dense forest trail, the sound of water running nearby, the sharp scent of pine and decay, and the pale color of the sky as the sun dipped low. It was poetic, eerie. "I was supposed to be alone," he added after a pause. But something followed. Kendra and her colleagues frantically tried to triangulate the signal, but it was like trying to pin down smoke. The call flickered in and out, the location data inconsistent and erratic, jumping between coordinates miles apart. Just when they managed to narrow it down to a few square miles of forest preserve, the man's voice faltered. "I can see it now," he whispered. "It doesn't have a face." Then static, a harsh crackle. Then nothing. Search teams were dispatched immediately. They found a trail matching his description, and near the end, a clearing with a single tree stump. On top of the stump was a phone. Cracked, cold, its battery drained completely. No sign of the man, no footprints nearby. Just deep, erratic claw marks carved into the surrounding trees, forming a spiral pattern radiating outward from the stump. When the dispatcher reviewed the recording, a chill passed through her. Beneath the man's final words, almost hidden beneath the static, was another voice. Raspy, distorted, repeating the man's exact words in perfect unison. Not an echo. A mimic. The baby monitor. In late 2015, a young mother named Lily moved into a small starter home on the edge of a quiet neighborhood in Wisconsin. Her husband worked night shifts, so she spent most evenings alone with their infant son. The baby monitor became her lifeline, her assurance that all was well, until it started whispering. At first, she assumed it was just interference. The occasional burst of static, odd clicks, maybe even a neighbor's cordless phone bleeding into the frequency. But as nights passed, the sounds changed. They became clearer, structured, intentional. It was a voice. Low, male. Whispers that hovered just on the edge of comprehension. She changed the frequency settings, switched channels, bought a new monitor altogether. But the voice came back, always at 3:30 a.m., always just when she was drifting into sleep. Then it said her name, not once, over and over. One night, the baby cried out. Lily rushed to the nursery, heart hammering. But the crib was empty. In a blind panic, she screamed for her child. And just as suddenly as he'd vanished, she blinked. And he was there again, asleep in her arms. Desperate and terrified, Lily dialed 911. The dispatcher could barely understand her through the sobs. It knows my name. It said my name. When police arrived, they found Lily and her baby locked in the bathroom. The nursery looked untouched. The air was cold, unnaturally still. The baby monitor was still plugged in. It hissed softly. Then clearly, a whisper. She knows. The audio was captured and sent to forensics. The analysis was baffling. There was no evidence of external signal interference. The frequency didn't match any local broadcasts, phone signals, or baby monitor overlap. It wasn't bouncing off another unit. It was transmitting. From nowhere. Lily moved out 2 weeks later, despite the cost and inconvenience. She refused to ever step foot in the house again. Her husband didn't question it. The baby monitor was submitted into evidence. To this day, it remains sealed in a soundproof case inside the evidence locker at the county sheriff's department. No one has turned it on since. But officers on night duty sometimes swear they hear something faint from inside the box, a whisper. She knows.